Dear Sir or Madam, my name, as you are well aware by now, is Richard of Monic Huffenegel, and this is my confession of guilt into the homicide you are currently investigating, the murder of actor Denzel Washington. Also in this letter, I will be confessing to an unplanned killing related to the case. But before anybody draws any character profiles, motives, or righteous feelings of contempt for me, the cold-blooded murderer, I implore you to read this letter to its conclusion and consider my perspective. I'm a 24-year-old stockbroker, an employee of Legg Mason in Baltimore, Maryland. The fall of 1999 was a rough period for me where I fell into bad health. I lost a coveted position in a stock brokerage. I was on the verge of going bankrupt as well as failing out of night school classes. So on December 23rd, I returned to my hometown of Keswick, Indiana, and there I rested, but more importantly, I began eating on a regular basis again. I stayed there for 4 weeks. I lived with my mother. I spent the first week visiting some old friends from childhood, and generally I lived a lazy lifestyle. I'd wake up at 4 p.m., go to bed at 11 p.m., take periodic naps in between, the whole time spent on a comfy 10-foot-long couch. And I'd sit there, and switching the stations on the television would occupy my time. I'd change between Family Matters, WKRP in Cincinnati, Hill Street Blues, Malcolm X on Showtime, Family Matters.
Malcolm X on Showtime. Malcolm X on Showtime. Malcolm X on Showtime.
And you see, putting this movie on snapped me back to a time in my life when I was 13 years old in Refugio Showcase 12 at the Keswick Cineplex. It was December 25th, 1992, and it was the night I saw the movie for the first time.
We didn't land on Plymouth Rock! Plymouth Rock landed on us!
He spake, and this line from Denzel's muscular tongue awoke a new spirit in me. And watching his authoritative eyes and dominating posture as he declared for me his position on different types of rocks, my eyes and ears belonged to Denzel. And the further into the movie I progressed, the sooner I realized that I was no longer just watching an actor, but rather looking at myself in the near future. And Denzel's words were no longer being broadcast from the speakers of the theater.
They were emitting themselves inside me, and we knew what words were going to be spoken a half step before the image mouthed them.
When I left the theater, I was back to my old self again. I whipped out my Game Boy and played a couple of games of Super Mario Land 2 and waited for my mother to show up. Mom showed up in our new 1993 maroon Toyota Camry wagon yelling, "Rabbit, get in the car!" And it was then I lapsed into my new, then blessed state.
I walked to the driver's side door, my abs tightening, shoulders rising, the whites of my eyes expanding and angled slightly downward. And I declared, almost unwillingly, "It's my time to bring our family home."
"What, Rabbit?" she asked.
To clarify for the ignorant, I need to drive the vehicle tonight. Little Rabbit had backed out of the driveway before, but tonight he moved a step toward equality. We drove home unsatisfied, but progress had been made.
Well, in the coming years, I stood taller and I tugged from a higher summit than any of my siblings or peers. I bought a copy of Malcolm X as soon as it became available on video cassette, and I proceeded to watch it, and twice, every day, for the next 17 months. I also watched each and every Denzel Washington movie multiple times, and whenever a new one would open,
I would rush to the theater to watch myself. This feeling, which by this point I believe had become parasitic to me, transformed me from a
4'9", 13-year-old schmuck collecting Batman action figures and watching Tiny Toons on Fox Kids to a
5'9", 17-year-old leader amongst children of high school.
My thoughts would differ from Denzel only in the opening moments of the day when I would see
my reflection
in the mirror.
I soon re-emerged in my blessed, respected state with each minute away from home. I could not control it, but in every situation I was involved in, whether it be a conflict with a customer at the 7-Eleven I worked at during high school, or on the soccer field with my teammates, managers, coaches, teachers, and parents all looked to me as an equal to settle conflicts through the eloquence
that I had no control over,
that our movie characters possess.
I enjoyed being this kind of civil rights leader, although
the respect we commanded amongst elders and peers benefited me the internships and positions I received through contact with the educated parents of my school. I soon realized that it had alienated me from the bonding I witnessed among my peers, the playful camaraderie among the teammates on the soccer team, and the impish resentment of the manager at 7-Eleven by the other employees my age. I ignored it, though. I shrugged it off like any setback a truly proud and righteous man standing in the face of oppression would.
Now, I was in college, and I was quickly repeating
my unwilled dominance in person-to-person interaction. Through this dominance,
I secured for myself a position in an up-and-coming stock brokerage.
By the end of my interview, there was confusion as to who was hiring who.
And I'll tell you this, you see, it was nice knowing that I achieved this type of respect I commanded. But when I'd wake up in the mornings, I'd sometimes have a problem remembering what I had declared the previous day. And I was becoming increasingly aware of this. And in my spare time, alone in my apartment, my mind would wonder about some of the things I had said in the past.
When we settled a conflict, stood in the face of an oppressive, unjust teacher, or, through our poetic words, turned an argument back around on a rowdy customer at 7-Eleven. 6-month-old milk spoils. It has no concern for the customer, its color, creed, or sexual orientation.
So to kill this confusion, I looked for something to take my mind off of these questions. I began watching daytime television. And I'd sit there and I'd switch the channels between Family Matters, WKRP in Cincinnati, Hill Street Blues, 321 Contact, Family Matters. Family Matters. I was appalled watching this show, seeing
That human manifestation of a pig!
Carl Winslow, the head of the Winslow household,
Verbally berate and abuse the kindness of one Stephen Q. Urkel, his young neighbor, whose only offense was being infatuated with Mr. Winslow's daughter, Laura. The Honorable Stephen Q. Urkel was an intelligent youth, in fact, a brilliant mathematician, but less gifted in terms of dealing with those forces that kept him bound in a state of meekness and servitude to the overbearing and ultimately unpleasant police officer, Carl.
Oh, Steve! I'm gonna kill you! Let me at him. You caused me more pain than any one day in the police force. These, my friends, these are but an abbreviated version of each and every line Carl Winslow ever spoke to Steve. And Steve, who was Steve? He was a cute, weak, skinny boy with big glasses and a high-pitched voice.
Mr. Winslow's contempt disgusted me. As to his credit, the Honorable Stephen Urkel had saved Mr. Winslow's life on several occasions, helped repair Mr. Winslow's garage, and even mediated disputes between Carl and his family, all while flattering the love of his life, Laura.
Laura. He was Carl's son Eddie's best friend, and the punching bag for Mr. Winslow.
To be verbally berated
and abused whenever his duties as police officer and loving father affected him too much. Now, to his credit, Mr. Winslow was an honorable law enforcement agent working against corruption in the police force,
inequalities in the prosecution and judgment of peoples of different races,
and other ethical conflicts that arose in his career. But in dealing with people on a personal level, in basic human interaction, Carl was nothing but distant and abusive, especially towards Steve. Yes, I began to notice the similarities between Carl
and myself. I was a man of respect, like Carl.
But I turned around and realized how distant I'd become from most people. There was no doubt that my spirit was
dominating, just and leading one.
But I tried to think about how many people I was actually close to. I don't believe I've mentioned a single one in the course of this whole letter. I even grew distant from my mother, the one person who cared to know me at this personal level. So, 1 month after beginning to watch Family Matters, I sat down in front of the television to further loathe Carl and criticize myself. Steve walks into the room, excited to see Laura. He clumsily attempts to remove his coat, and in the process trips, knocking over the coat rack. He then stands up and, trying to regain his balance, grabs for the curtains but pulls them open. He then stands up and asks in a high-pitched nasal voice,
"Did I do that?"
Knowing that, of course, yes, he did cause that.
Laura chides the Honorable Stephen Urkel with some harsh words. Yet behind them, I observed a certain loving quality, with affection coating their backs. I was shaken and drawn in by a new spirit.
"Did I do that?" we asked.
This line from behind Urkel's thick, fogged up glasses,
Awakened something new in me.
and watching his sad yet gleeful eye,
And his endearingly weak posture.
as if pathetically asking this question.
My senses were possessed.
And the more I watched, the more I realized that I was no longer watching an actor, but rather I was.
Looking at myself that I buried years ago.
And as I proceeded even more, I realized that Urkel's words were no longer being broadcast from the speakers of the television.
They were emitting themselves inside me, and we knew what words were going to be spoken a half step before my new image mouthed them.
So the next day, I went to work, and I was the same as usual, as I had been for the past 7 years. I spoke to nobody unless the situation required it. But later on, I was sitting at a desk while the members of the board began to debate on some sort of business or other. I sat at a common desk where I began to
Stare at a simple stapler, as well as a garbage can filled with wet trash leaning against it.
And then my sight changed. I no longer saw just these objects, but rather the potential for an accident. So I leaned the garbage can up at an angle to the desk, and then, unaware, I brushed the stapler off the desk, causing the garbage to spill out. An ink cartridge inside splattered black ink all over the desk of one of my coworkers.
Did I do that?
Yes.
Well, I laughed, and so did the other members of the board, but my boss removed me from the scene for making a joke of the situation. And it was then that I realized that I had
Snap back! I was Denzel again, which I had been free of for those few moments following the endearing accident. I tried to attempt to vigorously defend myself, but I found that I had nothing to say. I had no eloquent words to fire back, as the establishment punished the small man. Instead, I only smiled.
And snorted. His actions dictated to me by Jaleel.
the actor who plays Urkel to such acute brilliance.
I was no longer in control.
Now Denzel me!
Trying to fight against Jaleel me. Jaleel won out now, and I was happy as I got suspended for laughing at my bosses. I hadn't been this happy in a long time. My posture began to sink back to lower. I was wearing round, big glasses, and I hiked my pants to the sky. I stopped exercising as I had been for the last 7 years in order to increase my mass and
Respectful, knight-like appearance.
I stopped. And I was giggly and happy. A weight had been dropped, and I talked in a higher voice. I like me. Goofy me.
Jaleel and I lived as one. I even made a few friends. I continued going to my night school classes where I tried to remain still and serious, but so many accidents kept on happening that would make everybody laugh.
I was a clown, and people appreciated me.
Whether they respected me or not.
This was becoming a problem.
I could not stand this new me fouling up my attention span in classes and making me look unsophisticated in work. I was fired for repeated accidents.
I enjoyed being me a lot more now. I had many new friends. I couldn't wait to go back to my hometown to visit with my childhood buddies, people I had forgotten as I advocated them rather than befriending.
Well, so I returned to my hometown of Keswick, Indiana on December 23rd, and there I rested. But more importantly, I began eating on a regular basis again. I stayed there for 4 weeks, living with my mother, spending the first week visiting some old friends from my childhood, and generally living a lazy lifestyle. I would wake up at 4 p.m., go to bed at 11 p.m., take some periodic naps in between, the whole time spent resting on a 10-foot-long comfy couch. And I would sit there and I would fantasize about the love of my life, a girl named Laura. Other than that, switching the stations on the television would occupy my time. I would change between Family Matters to WKRP in Cincinnati, Hill Street Blues, Malcolm X on Showtime, Family Matters.
Malcolm X! Authoritative me woke up when I saw this again.
He didn't like all this goofing off, or the fact that nobody respected him anymore. He tried to make me start exercising again. He tried to make me fly back early to get ahead on January's upcoming work.
To conquer and make people respect me for the struggle I had to face every day.
We tried to fight him off, but his power was intense.
See, now know, my head began to hurt. I was in extreme pain most of the time. You see, I realized I couldn't live so happy anymore. But at the same time, I couldn't live in such protocol either.
I enjoyed my new life a lot better.
But, you see, I couldn't take it because I was always confused. I was always... Did I do that? I realized what a problem I had. You see, Denzel was
Fighting inside of me and punishing me for trying to live!
this unstructured life. So 4 weeks after I returned home, I flew out to Los Angeles because I just had to rid myself of this possession.
I arrived in Los Angeles on January 25th. From reading the newspapers in the airport gift shop, I learned that I would be attending the premiere of the latest Bruce Willis movie. As a guest.
And it would be here that I would go to rid myself
Of myself.
I bought a large brown teddy bear in the gift shop as a present for my sweetheart.
A girl named Laura.
And I arrive at the theater, and I await by the fence. First arrives Bruce Willis, then Wesley Snipes and Matt LeBlanc and a bunch of other actors I've never heard of. And there we are. There I am. There's me, Denzel Washington, getting out of a big white limousine. So I quickly jump behind the guardrail and hide behind the bush. The movie ends. And I trail the exiting limo in a rented motorcycle with teddy bear and revolver and backpack. Mr. Washington exits the limo, and I know this already. We are behind his mansion.
Who are you? What are you doing here?
He said, laughing. Just laughing. Laughing? This wasn't the proud man that was torturing me. Hey, how about a drink, buddy? And then I realized he was drunk. We both felt relieved. And I thought perhaps I was going to be lucky. I wouldn't have to carry out the deed, that I wouldn't have to kill Denzel, as the man in front of me was not the
Rigid, noble, eloquent, and distinguished honorable man
who had ruined my life. And he stuck out his hand as though I should shake it. But he was so slobbering drunk that he tripped, falling into me and causing me to drop some of my possessions. My gun fell out.
Security! Security! Oppress this man! Arrest this man! Now! He decreed like a truly proud and righteous man.
Well, I had to defend myself, so I picked up my gun and fired 2 shots.
I missed both.
So I got him in a stranglehold and choked him out.
Did I do that?
He was down. Well, you see, what happened is the shots must have made a lot of noise because 2 large men, whom I suspected to be security guards, came rushing over to subdue the attacker. Well, as the first one came running towards me, I stuck out my foot and tripped him. He was down. Now the second one came running at me. I had him.
This was another one of my tortures. It took me a minute to realize who it was.
It was Carl!
Or rather, Reginald Vell Johnson, the actor who plays him. He must have been a guest at the mansion. He threw a couple of punches at me.
And kicked me in the groin. I was hurt. I didn't want to hurt him, though. I still had some respect for the head of the Winslow household. I was getting pulverized. I had my teddy bear in hand, and I tried to defend myself. Hitting him with the bear wasn't working. He tried to bite me, and the bear wound up in his mouth. He coughed. He gasped. He suffocated on the present. For my Laura. Quickly assessing the situation, I escaped on my jetpack.
Detectives, had I not been attacked first, I would never have committed these crimes. Although I do feel guilty for murdering 2 people, I have never felt as
Light and free spirit as I do today. Please consider what I described and try to appreciate the pain that I'd suffered that would never have been resolved unless I did what I did. By the time you read this, I will be long gone, off to live a new life with my love, Laura.
Respectfully yours, Jaleel Wise.
Where's Carl?